Okay, good afternoon and welcome to the last session of the day of the PADA Annual Summit 2021 under the theme Reflect, Reconnect, and Revive. First of all, thank you for joining us on session 4, and thank you for all of you who've actually been with us through all the sessions throughout the day. I'm looking at you, Zaim. I think you've been with us at all the sessions, so thank you so much for sitting through a full day of webinars. I know sometimes it's tough for a lot of people, but I do applaud all of you who've been with us all day. So once again, let me introduce myself. If you don't know now, my name is Paul Brancan. I am the Director of Communications and External Affairs at the Pacific Asia Travel Association, and I'm, of course, your host for the next few days. Just before we get into the session, I do have a couple of technical notes. Once again, for those of you who haven't heard this before, this is something new. For those of you who've heard this before, just sit back. I'll get this fairly quickly. So if you're watching this on the web version, if you want to send any questions to the moderator or the panelists, please do submit them using the chat function on the right-hand side of your screen. For the chat function, feel free to introduce yourself, where you're from, what you're doing, any thoughts you have about some of the discussions happening, right? I mean, I've seen some of the discussions before. It's been great. Keep it up. Use that to interact with your fellow delegates and, of course, to submit any questions. So that's for the web version. If you're using the mobile version, it's the same thing. Just click on session chat, and then it'll open a new window, and then you just will submit your questions or, of course, submit any comments or thoughts about the current session. So we've looked at reflect, we've looked at reconnect, we've looked at revive. So what's next? This session is sponsored by our good friends at 2031, right? We've heard a bit from the non-governmental organizations. We've heard from online service providers and OTAs. We've heard from the aviation sector, and we've heard from the hospitality sector. So this session, we'll actually be hearing from the public sector. And moderating today's session, please, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome a partner at 2031 Consulting. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Greg Claussen. Greg?
Yeah, good morning, everybody. Thanks so very much, Paul. It's good morning from me here in Vancouver, Canada. I think it's a good late morning for others who are tuning in, and it's a good afternoon to most of you in Asia Pacific. So really excited to be here today and to quickly chat with you about what's happening, what's new, what's going on in our post-COVID world. And today we have an esteemed group of panelists from, we hope, from 3 of the world's most prolific countries where tourism accounts for a significant portion of their country's revenue. I say maybe 3 because we're having technical issues with one of our delegates today from South Africa. So we'll stay tuned on that one. But of course, what we're talking about here is Egypt, we're talking about South Africa, and we're talking about the Philippines. And because the tourism is such a significant role in their country's economies, it also means that they've suffered some significant devastation to their own economy. So we will have some chats a little bit later about that and talking about what that implication has been. But from these countries, far from taking a break, and I do have firsthand knowledge from 2 of those countries, is that these destinations and these officials have been working very, very hard at reimagining what tourism is going to be for their destinations, for their tourism industries, with an opportunity to perhaps come back even stronger and come back a little bit better. So we'll have an opportunity today to learn what lessons they have learned during this pandemic and maybe some of the trends that they're also seeing in order to build back their countries and build back their tourism economies to be better. And in fact, that's really what today's panel is about. So with this pause, our industry has a once in a generation opportunity to reimagine what tourism means for their future of these countries and perhaps leverage and look at some of those trends to see what is going to happen around the corner. But before I introduce the panelists, let me just share my screen here and I'll walk you through just a couple of thoughts in terms of what we think is happening from the tourism side in a COVID and post-COVID world. So let's start with the name "What's Next for Tourism" as the world transitions. As the world transitions outside of COVID, what does the future of tourism look like? How will that unfold? We know that still in spite of some significant COVID challenges, and I'm thinking about our great friends in India right now who are suffering greatly due to COVID, in spite of some of those new variants that are coming in other parts of the world and having a significant impact, we do see some glimmer of light at the end of the tunnel. And let's hope we're not using that term any longer, light at the end of the tunnel. But the thing about tunnels is that you come out a different place than how you go in. So again, what will be those lessons from COVID? What are we going to learn? And how are we going to consider bringing back tourism for the future? When we look at the cover of The Economist, this was in February, on the cover of The Economist magazine. And again, remember that The Economist magazine is more accustomed to providing with content and information about wars and famine and government challenges and challenges with economies and all of those kinds of things. And years ago, the tourism industry would have killed for positive press in The Economist, knowing that we'd had some challenges that we'd been facing with things like over-tourism, impact on the environment. But The Economist magazine is rather optimistic about our future. And I think that The Economist magazine can be optimistic about our future. We can as well, suggesting that tourism will rebound and maybe even improve. Suggesting that the pandemic may accelerate trends that will make travel both easier and less damaging, and that travel will return more exotically than ever before. And I thought, what a great theme for us to consider as we come out again at the other end of that tunnel to see what the future might look like and what trends we might be able to hold on to into that future. We also have some warnings, though. Suzanne Becken, who's professor of sustainable tourism at the Griffith Institute for Tourism at Griffith University in Australia, suggests in her own op-ed that tourism desperately wants to return to the old normal, but that would be a disaster. And of course, the old normal is a consideration, as I said earlier, about the impact that tourism has had on some of our environment, some of our culture, with 2019 being the biggest year ever for tourism itself. Does biggest year ever mean the return that we want to go to? And I know, of course, more customers right now would be important because we have challenges, significant challenges facing each of our countries. But do we want tourism to look a lot like the old days in that return? And just in case you haven't had enough of this particular chart and understanding, I can't think of any better words than an unprecedented, very bad, terrible, horrible year. I've run out of words to describe how challenging this past year. And knowing and understanding, and I've been in tourism for over 25 years. I was in tourism during 9/11. I was in tourism during the SARS epidemic, and in tourism during the global economic crisis. And each one of those times, we were nervous, we worried, we thought about what kind of comeback will happen as a result of tourism, and we lamented the -1% and -4% drops in tourism. But of course, that was just training wheels for what we're experiencing right now, with the most significant drops, and really recognizing that our worst case scenario is actually coming true during tourism. But I also want to point out something optimistic about. In each one of those years, in the past 20 years or so, where tourism was in significant decline, it came back with a vengeance. It came back better than ever. The growth rates in the subsequent years, and of course, growth from tourism in the past number of years has been rather significant. So we do see some optimism. We do see some opportunity for tourism to come back and come back strong as well. So what are other governments? We're going to talk to our governments today with our panelists, but what are other governments doing to use this pause to rethink what tourism is to their places? And a couple of examples. The one is that Portugal itself is looking at retraining and spending a lot of time and money training their tourism industry in order to, when they welcome back their visitors, to become even that much better. New Zealand, quite famously, with their new tourism minister, suggested that they're only focusing on super higher yield travelers, again, eschewing the backpackers. And again, a rather controversial statement that he was made, but really looking at and suggesting that only a higher yield traveler. So recasting the product, the experiences, and focusing their marketing on bringing back higher yield travelers. We know that Mexico, of course, is looking at dispersing their visitors a little bit more equitably across that country. Perhaps a little less Cancun, a little less Acapulco, and a little bit more of some of those smaller, local, authentic, off the beaten track destinations within Mexico in order to distribute their travelers a little bit more equitably across that region. And the same thing in Thailand. Again, Thailand focusing on a program of their 55 less traveled to places themselves in order to focus on, again, dispersing a little less Phuket, a little less Bangkok, and a little bit more of some of those that particular country's gems in local and authentic places. Again, all of these things are saying we're going to use our pause to determine what the comeback is going to look like and how tourism might be just a little bit different. But the greatest barrier to our comeback at all and our next normal of tourism may not necessarily be the disease itself. It really is what's going on right now, which is the fear of travel. The fear of travel, the fear of travelers, any of those people who are carrying suitcases must be carrying COVID, with this belief that the tourism industry and travel itself has brought the disease across the planet. And will be important to us to unscare travelers, to make them feel comfortable, make them feel confident in travel. And that loss of confidence in travel, and I'm going to show you a graph in a minute, will be critically important. But that includes things like travel shaming. Those people who are actually getting away and going on a vacation or going on a trip are being shamed right now, and that has to end. The fear of travelers, we need to give some assurances to local and residents that they can welcome back tourism into their communities and into their places once we know that there are a number of people with vaccinations or at least testing, COVID testing on arrival. There's a lot of confusion right now in many countries around the world that we operate in and what the actual rules are. Are we allowed to travel? How are we allowed to travel? But one of the most critical ones of all is really that loss of joy in travel. If we have to go to travel to different places, still wear our masks, still stand in lineups, still be socially distanced in all of those places that we're going, it just simply is that the research is telling us that people just aren't traveling at all because it's just not fun anymore. If we have to do all those things while we travel, those are the same things we have to do at home. There really is no benefit to getting away at all. When I talked about the loss of confidence in travel, we see a couple of things. 30%, only less than 1/3 of the whole world, and this is based on a March 30th review from Deloitte, only 1/3, less than 1/3 feel safe flying right now, and about the same number feel safe staying in a hotel. That really is taking about 2/3 of our tourism market outside of us, and we're really going to be focusing on very, very few travelers, depending on how this number changes on a month-by-month basis. The good news is that the United States, one of the most vaccinated countries in the world, one that is really focused on vaccinating their people, that number is significantly higher. It's getting closer to a half of Americans are really feeling safe flying, and about half are feeling safe in a hotel. And right now, that has been in domestic markets itself, demonstrating that most of those domestic markets are coming back. But we really need those Americans to be flying to our countries, to other parts of the world with that level of confidence. But we have to provide them with that confident welcome to our countries at the same time. And as other countries like the UK's quick vaccinations unfolds, we'll be able to welcome them as well. So if we're looking forward to, if we're suggesting that if tourism is looking to 2019 to help recover its industry, it really is looking in the wrong direction. So much will have changed as a result of COVID. Low traveler confidence, will that continue towards 2022? And what role can our tourism industry play in helping boost that confidence so that we can get people back in those hotel rooms and back on those planes? What about tourism supply channels and air routes and others that we relied on prior to 2019? Are they going to be there to support our recovery, or are they going to be coming to our countries? Because of course, those channels, those tour operators, are going to start to bring their customers to those destinations that have higher vaccination rates, that have a higher level of confidence to welcoming their visitors, that have a plan, actually have a post-COVID plan to regain tourism itself. Current research suggests, again, as I said, that less than 30% of consumers will even consider travel in 2021. We need to change that number. We have to change the narrative about what travel is going to look like. And we hear a lot about revenge travel, so much pent up demand for travel. And of course, that might happen, that probably will happen. But by the time some of our countries reopen their borders, maybe that pent up demand will have been spent already in other places. So again, it's going to be extremely competitive for 2021 and beyond. It's far, far too many destinations chasing too few travelers. And vaccination progress, again, will partly determine how tourism will unfold. And those countries that can vaccinate their residents first may most likely open their tourism industries first and serve as perhaps potential source markets. As I said, being in the top 10, both high volume outbound markets like the US and the UK are significant source markets for all of our tourism industries. And again, if we were to focus on any one particular market to help us recover, those would be the two markets we're looking at. We've also got a lot of competitors in there, again, with the UAE vaccinating most of its residents, or doing a very good job with that. And of course, opening up their tourism industries early to welcome those visitors. So again, lots of competition in that field. So a couple of trends. We've done 21 trends. 2031 has done 21 trends for 2021. Again, looking at a whole bunch of different sources and pulled together those trends that were referenced in multiple media sources to draw out what was important. And I've got a couple here just to start off our conversation with our panelists. The first one is about hygiene over fees. Again, travel decisions and proof and evidence that support this, that travel decisions are dramatically influenced by new cleanliness standards. Instead of the usual, here's the price point, here's the cost, here's the resort, here's the number of stars, and here's why you should travel to our particular country, we now need to make room to suggest that we have cleanliness factors are front and center and top of mind. Will this trend continue post-COVID? We think so, but time will tell whether that it can be relaxed a little bit more or not. Embracing work from everywhere. One of the positive outcomes of COVID, of course, has been the opportunity that we can work from wherever we happen to be. We've proved it. We're doing a conference today over Zoom. Instead of my being in Bangkok, I'm sitting here in Vancouver. And that means that most of our employees are untethered. They're no longer tied to their desks. So they can come to any country around the world, work in their time zones, and collectively work. And there's a number of pieces of evidence. Tour operators are starting to see this and start to package for younger people and even older people who can work from anywhere, packaging them trips to Bali, trips to other places around the world, collectively working and living together in lodges. What might that mean? It might mean that instead of pricing by the night, some hotels will start to price by the month. Maybe some lodges will pull together shared workspaces within their lobbies and within their public spaces themselves. Wellness tourism, very important. We've learned a lot through COVID about the importance of being well if you were to get the disease, no pre-existing conditions. Wellness, we think, is going to be a significant opportunity going forward, and it's not just simply that spa-based wellness, but the wellness of being outside, the wellness of getting exercise and fresh air and being outside with nature itself is giving that mental health benefits of wellness at the same time. And finally, proof of testing, passports, COVID-19 passports, passport challenges. I know there's controversial in many areas, but will countries recognize passports, or will countries require passports in order to bring visitors in? And again, there's a lot of discussion right now about the quality of the vaccine that you're getting, different views on different brands of vaccines. The the European community just opened up and just said that they're opening up possibly for the summer to American travelers as long as they're vaccinated with one of their 3 vaccines that are officially recognized in the EU. So challenges again with passports. How are they going to happen? But maybe a very quick opportunity for us to reopen and reconsider our tourism industries. So with that, I'm going to get out of my presentation and bring in the panelists themselves. So let me start by introducing our esteemed panelists themselves. The first one I'd like to introduce is Her Excellency Ghada Chalabi. She's the Vice Minister for Tourism, the Ministry of Tourism and Antiquities for the country of Egypt. Good morning, good afternoon, Ghada. Thank you so very much for spending some time with us today.
Good morning and afternoon, Greg. How are you doing? And everyone.
You're great. I really appreciate your time today and looking forward to hearing your thoughts and your insights. Next, I'd like to introduce Mr. Benito Bengzon Jr. He's the Undersecretary of Tourism Development for the Philippines. Hello to you.
Good afternoon, Greg, or good morning to you.
It's confusing, isn't it?
We've
got so many time zones. Everybody's in a different time zone. You're in the Philippines, and the minister is in Egypt, and I'm here in Vancouver. So, and you know what? Isn't that great? Isn't it? It feels really good to feel like we're actually virtually traveling to all of these different places themselves. And I'm afraid I don't see the CEO of South African Tourism, who is CISA. Who is seemingly either having technical difficulties or another challenge. So it'll just be the 2 of you today, but we will make that all the much better. So a warm welcome to all of our panelists. And just a warning to you that after I ask you a bunch of questions, I am going to finally come back after we've had an opportunity to get some of our delegates to ask you questions, what some of your key takeaways from today might be. So that will be the final round. I just want to warn you as you go through and consider some of those other questions. So let me start with a question, and either of you go ahead and answer this. This is going to be perhaps more of a conversation now that we have those 2 panelists instead of 3. But I'm wondering, after seeing my presentation, how is your destination taking time during this tourism pause to maybe reimagine what tourism can be for your regions and your destinations? How might this impact what your vision is for tourism for your region over the next 5, maybe 10 years? So, John, who wants to go first? Anybody? Ghada, why don't you go first? Thank you.
Sure. Well, Greg, it's been a challenge during the past year, going through the pandemic and going through the crisis that the whole world been through, which makes us realize that you can't really expect any crisis. When you set your priorities, when you think about how crisis management should be, you can't really eliminate any items. You have to check all the odds and really be prepared for all the recovery plans. The year, yes, was been really difficult while we were when the pandemic really opened, and while we were ensuring that everything was kept to keep the health and safety of our travelers, same as our staff, in the right place. We were also looking after repatriation of the travelers, either from the destination or bringing back our people back to the country. We were ensuring also the health and safety of the places. One key issue that we were quite keen about when we were closing travel, that we would do it gradually. We kept in our minds that people were in the destination and they wanted to enjoy their time and they wanted to make the investment, the best of the investment that they've put. So we did not really close travel immediately. It was gradual. And this shows how important travel and tourism for us. And we wanted really not to disturb the travelers. So ensuring their health and safety and procedures were kept to let them enjoy the rest of their vacation. And this was in the beginning of the pandemic. Later on, we had to set our priorities. The priority number one was review all our procedures. Everything in the hotel establishments, in the restaurants, in the touristic sites and monuments were reviewed thoroughly. And accordingly, procedures were put in place to ensure that every spot is being reviewed. Every touch point is reviewed to be hygienated and really hygiened and kept well. Second thing was training and ensuring that staff were trained in keeping their health and safety, their own health and safety, and also ensuring that travelers' health and safety were appropriately mandated. The third thing was communication. We wanted everyone to know what we were doing, how we are doing it, ensuring that we're opening channels of communication with our partners, with customers, with other governments as well. They would know every step in the way what we are doing. The most important thing that we did not keep quiet. Our excavations and discoveries were taking place as well during the year. We wanted to keep the destination up in the minds of the travelers and the minds of the whole world. So while tourism was put on hold, the destination was up and running, and lots of historical and archaeological discoveries were made, and we've ended up with a pharaonic parade early this month, and which I think kept the destination in the minds of the travelers.
I am absolutely going to ask you about that later. You've just had this, it helps during a pandemic to find 5,000-year-old lost cities, it turns out, which is absolutely amazing. And it's so exciting for Egypt and just in time, again, just to help support the recovery. I'm going to ask now Benito what your thoughts are in terms of a return to tourism. Is it going to be different in the Philippines? Or does it need to be? I mean, you've got this amazingly beautiful destination. It's growing quickly. I think 2019, if I'm not wrong, was your record year for tourism. Is that coming back? Are we going to build back for that? You're on mute, Mr. Benzong. Thank you.
Okay, the first thing that I'd like to highlight is that just like most other destinations around the globe, the Philippines is heavily dependent on tourism. 2019, you're correct, was a banner year for us. We had about 8.2 million foreign visitors. We generated about $10 billion US. And as you can imagine, we were also severely impacted by the pandemic. But I think one thing that I would like to emphasize is that we were probably one of the few destinations around the globe that started crafting a recovery plan even as the pandemic was unfolding. Now, most international borders were closed in the middle of March, and by the latter part of that month, our tourism minister, Berna Romulo Puyat, already instructed us to come up with a recovery roadmap. And this is a blueprint for the response and recovery of the tourism industry in the Philippines. Just like most other roadmaps, the key objective is to mitigate the impact of the pandemic on the tourism industry. Now, what did we focus on in the early months of the pandemic? The first thing that we worked on was to help stranded passengers. And mind you, there were tens of thousands all over the country. So we extended assistance to both foreign and domestic travelers. And mind you, some of the foreign travelers actually opted to stay in the Philippines and just to wait it out in the islands, instead of going back to their home countries. But the focus initially was on helping stranded passengers. And we were very thankful for the support that our partners from the private sector. They started providing rooms for the stranded passengers, for the medical frontliners, this and that. Beyond the repatriation phase, we started focusing on providing a lifeline to our tourism enterprises. And this we were able to work out through some legislation, providing working capital loans for hotels, resorts, other tourism enterprises. So a lifeline for the tourism enterprises. Second is that we were also able to provide financial assistance to the displaced tourism workers. Those who were hit by furlough, reduced salaries, reduced allowances, you were able to provide that kind of an assistance. So while we were providing assistance to our tourism stakeholders, we also made sure that we were capacitating our frontliners. We know that many of the workers in the hotels, the resorts, will be affected in one way or another. So we started coming up with all these online training programs on destination branding and development, Filipino brand of service excellence, organizing events on digital platforms, a wide range of training programs. And again, this is all part of capacitating. So are we looking at the 2019 levels? I think the default reference is always 2019. People talk about when are we going back to 2019 or pre-pandemic levels. I think people use that essentially just to refer to maybe the head count or the revenue that we were registering during that year. But in terms of business model, 2020 has compelled us to push the reset button. And for destinations that are for destinations that have been adopting a low density but high value kind of tourism experience, then this will work to their advantage. The way we see it is we would still want tourism to be a major contributor to the Philippine economy, but certainly there will be new business models that we will be looking at. And we will have to consider very carefully that consumer expectations, consumer behaviors will change post-pandemic.
Yeah, thank you. I am going to talk about that question again to both of you. We know that there are lots of tensions between the two types of tourism. There's the mass, the volume, the charter, the resort-based tourism, which is great. I mean, it's part of our tourism. It's what we offer and what we can offer, and there's lots of demand for that. But sometimes that gets in the way of that higher yield, higher quality type of tourism that is really focused on less volume and more quality. And we know that those tensions exist in almost every country, but are they really bad, or are they manageable? I mean, is it a myth that we can manage these? Because we've built our tourism industries to support that mass tourist. So can we really, turn a blind eye to that and start to grow the higher yield tourism that everybody wants? Or is that something that can be done over the next 10 or 20 years? And Vice Minister, perhaps I'll start with you. And you're on mute as well.
Well, in Egypt, we cater for both types of tourism. We have the mass tourists, and we have also the quality ones. We have resorts that can accommodate up to, 1,000 and 2,000 tourists. And also we have the small boats that are cruising through the Nile for an exclusive experience of the pharaonic civilization. So the diversity of the products that we have in Egypt can cater for both. But because of the current situation and the limited occupancy that we are putting % in all resorts and all properties, this means that we have to also consider costs for travelers. And it's putting us also in the challenge of making travel affordable, because you still need the numbers, you need the workers to find suitable jobs, and you have the limited resources. Beaches will not, expand forever. So you really need to manage your resources and try to get the best of the infrastructure that you have. What we've done recently, that we've set a minimum pricing for hotel properties, whereby no hotel chain can, sell lower than this price, and this would put a limit towards how low can you market for your product. This is from a sustainability point of view. We wanted to preserve our natural resources. So we're not catering for really the very cheap products. And this is a transformation by itself. We were happy to see that private sector received this, the majority of the private sector received this decision warmly, and they've really encouraged it because what they are needing to do as well is to give the service and as well, reduce the competition. So I believe that the trend is going to be towards more responsible tourism, charter flights and flights that are going towards the touristic destinations will continue, I believe, because what we've done in our properties was not done in the aeroplanes because of air circulation theory. Um, Flights are not reducing their capacity, but in a destination, we're doing that. So you need to cater also for the packages and for the mass production, but with a reasonable pricing that the destination has to really evaluate the value of its resources and the income that they should be getting.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And it's such, I have to say that, I study a lot of different countries' response to COVID, and it's such a brave move for government to use policy to attach a minimum price to the hotels. Because no hotelier wants government intervention into anything that they do. But if they've welcomed that idea, it means that you've all got to band together and make sure that you're looking at a higher value, higher quality customer, because often it's just a race to the bottom otherwise. Maybe I'll ask about the Philippines and what your thoughts are in terms of that tension between the higher yield visitor, the quality of that visitor, and maybe the volume, and how to best recover the Philippines tourism industry.
In my opinion, I believe the objective here is to achieve an optimum mix between the low volume but high yield market on one end, and then on the other hand, bigger numbers but potentially smaller margin. We do realize that there are some hotels and resorts now that are configured to cater to larger groups, but for destinations and other properties that have a little bit of flexibility, we will see a shift towards smaller groups. And this has something to do with, again, consumer behavior and expectations. We've also done our own survey on domestic travel in the Philippines, and what we found out is that Filipinos would want to travel in smaller groups, initially with families and friends. But I think moving forward, another thing that we will see more of is greater appreciation of concepts with respect to carrying capacity, environmental protection, sustainability. So at least these are the concepts and principles that we will see more of in the destinations as they reopen. And I also think that there will be greater focus on destination management as opposed to just destination promotion. I mean, talk about destination management, invariably the protocols, the health and safety guidelines will have to come into play. And I guess in a way, the Philippines has a bit of an advantage because we also crafted the health and safety guidelines for the different subsectors of tourism early on. We identified all the critical touch points in the customer journey, and we made sure that health and safety protocols are all in place, not only for the protection of the traveler, but in a lot of cases, also for the sake of the tourism frontliners, and most importantly, for the host communities.
Wow. I mean, it's just great to see that tourism has taken such strong initiative. You guys talked about how tourism came to the table to repatriate and house those who have been stranded. Tourism came to the table to support and develop these measures that would help make their workplaces safer, but also safer for visitors at the same time. I'm hoping that that's getting recognized within government, because tourism really is sometimes undervalued in our governments. And to see that that you guys have came to the table in both of those countries, I think is super impressive. I'm going to talk about my final two questions for you before we get to the other panel, or sorry, the other questions, is really around certifications. You guys both talked about health and safety as being such important parts of recovering your tourism industry. But does that need to be certified? Do we need, like we certify that this hotel has 4 or 5 stars, like restaurants are certified as food safe? Do we need tourism safe certification? Is that on your radar screen?
Yes, from day one, we wanted accreditation from any international authorities that we do our that also do the inspection of
I'm sorry, Vice Minister, we really can't hear you. If you could,
Can you
not
hear
sure
me now?
why. Yeah, a little bit better, yeah.
Okay, so yes, I was saying that we've ensured that we are getting the right certification from international authorities, UNWTO, WDTC, WHO certification. All of the international recognized authorities were on board with us, reviewing our procedures, reviewing the inspection procedures that we have in place, to ensure that we are giving an internationally recognized certification. We've also invented a certification for the health and safety of the properties that is inspired from the pharaonic hieroglyphics language, and we've said 3 letters, 3 words, meaning health, prosperity, and safety. And this was the certification that we gave also to the properties when we review their procedures, to identify them from the properties that did not follow the procedures. So the customers and those ones who did not apply for the health and safety certificates were not given the permission to operate. And this time, we can't really jeopardize the procedures that we have in place. Tourism is quite important for us, and also our reputation and our integrity in the procedures that we were putting. So it was our prime focus from day one to ensure that our regulations are reviewed, are certified from the international organizations, and also implemented and followed up. Now, we have in place a workforce to vaccinate all staff working in the tourism. We've given with the Ministry of Health, the priorities were for the elders and most vulnerable, and also for the tourism sector. So this was a second priority after the elders and the most vulnerable. From the perspective that the government knew how travel and tourism is quite important for its economy. So now we are rolling out vaccination for all staff who are working in the field to ensure travelers, governments, other governments, that we are taking it seriously and we are not jeopardizing neither our staff or travelers who are coming. And we're going to seal this also with another seal for staff saying that I'm vaccinated, which means that, because again, vaccination is an optional activity. However, people who need to or are working in the travel would have to be vaccinated. Otherwise, they would be in the, in non-customers facing activity. Otherwise, we are jeopardizing our procedures. So,
Thank you.
yes,
Yeah,
national certification is quite on the top of our priorities.
Thank you so very much. Yeah, and Undersecretary, what about your thoughts on certification?
Well, in the Philippines, we have an accreditation system for all tourism enterprises. This is mandated by law. So that is your assurance of quality standards across different tourism establishments. On top of that, we have health and safety guidelines that are all aligned with the standards set by the World Health Organization. And in September of last year, we're also very happy to share with you that the Philippines received its Safe Travel Stamp from the World Travel and Tourism Council. And since then, we have accredited or granted safe travel stamps to about 40 enterprises all around the country. So this is your assurance that we meet the health requirements of future, well, present and future travelers.
Undersecretary, you mentioned that you did some research. Was certification or health and hygiene standards part? Did people come back and say, "I want to make sure that things are safe"?
Yes, the survey, the most recent survey that we conducted was in December of last year. We call it the evolving landscape of domestic travel in the Philippines. We interviewed about 7,000 respondents. And the encouraging thing was that about 70 to 75% said that they will travel even during the pandemic. But they will place a lot of importance or premium on health and safety guidelines. So not surprisingly, that came out as the number one factor to consider. But the encouraging thing about it also is that 90 to 95% said that they are willing to comply with the minimum public health standards, wearing the mask, washing hands, etc. And maybe something to just put on the table also, because this is quite interesting, at least from our perspective. When we asked the 7,000 respondents what the main reason was for wanting to travel, what came out was to maintain their sanity. So it's no longer a luxury, but it's seen as a necessity. And we were quite surprised.
Yeah.
Yep, that came out as the number one reason for wanting to travel.
So that bodes well into the idea of wellness, because travel is wellness itself. That's very encouraging. I'm glad to hear that. I have one final question before we get to the other group's questions. And this one's a bit controversial because it's vaccine passports. Just wondering if either of your nations have a position on accepting vaccine passports. What would they look like? And will this help you recover tourism faster? Vice Minister.
Well, since we are declaring our staff and our population being vaccinated, and as we are rolling over this exercise, of course, once it becomes certified by the international authority, I believe from ICAO, from WHO, UNWTO, and there is a lot of debate on that. I jump into lots of discussions about the vaccine passport, and but it's all positive. It's all going towards how we should accept it, how can we implement it, who is eligible for it, and it depends also. Nobody knows in the world how this vaccination is going to carry over. Is it once in a lifetime? Is it going to happen every year? We really don't know. No able to identify this as yet. So if it is going to be implemented and recognized, the government of Egypt as well will consider that and will take it on board of its procedures.
Thank you. How about you, Undersecretary? What's the Philippines' thought on that?
The idea of vaccine passports is being discussed at the highest level. No final decision has been made yet. But certainly what we want is to facilitate travel across borders. In my opinion, what is going to be crucial here is first, there has to be a conclusive study that will show how vaccination will reduce the transmission of the virus. And as the Vice Minister pointed out, it is something that we have to get once a year or every 2 years. So that's one thing that has to be addressed. I think the second thing that has to be addressed is, for vaccine passports to be successful, there really has to be an equitable distribution of the vaccines around the globe. We are all living under the same sun. So for us to ensure the success of such a concept, we have to make sure that everyone on the planet is given the vaccine.
Is that where our challenge is the equitability of access that will, because again, you look at it from the tourism perspective and say, the sooner we can get people vaccinated with their passports, the sooner we can get people traveling again. And then of course, there's the other side of that story that says that's unfair because some people are getting vaccines sooner than others. You know, there's another, we're filled with tensions, aren't we? But is that really, do we focus on recovery of the market and deal with the equitable thing later, or do we have to do both of those at the same time? Anybody?
Well, let me start. In my opinion, you can do it simultaneously. A lot of jobs are on the line. And again, in my opinion, we start where we can. If there are areas that are ready for the so-called travel bubbles or tourism bubbles, then this is something that has to be supported. Because again, I think the collective objective is to restart tourism in a safe manner. And again, there are some destinations that have demonstrated their capability to mount such flights between bubbles, and this is something that I think has to be supported by the tourism industry.
Great. Okay, thank you very much. We've got about 6 or 7 minutes left, so I've got a question here, a couple of them that are coming in. In this Corona, here's a question from, I'm not even going to try to mention this name, but it says, in the Corona epidemic, we students want to know something about how we can improve our education in the tourism sector. Is there anything that a student right now who's studying tourism can do to prepare for the future of tourism?
Well, I think sustainability is becoming the name of the game now. How can we improve the tourism sector while we are not exhausting our resources? And health and safety procedures. Now, marketing used to build on how beautiful the destination is and how the sceneries are and what are the activities. And we would have never dreamt that part of our marketing activities, we would be putting on our hospitals and the number of ICU units that we have. So I believe the education in tourism is taking a big shift. I think digitization is becoming also the name of the game, how we can improve touchless experience for travelers while ensuring also that the traveler is getting his dreamed holidays. I believe that tourism studies is going to take a different path in the coming future.
Fantastic. Any thoughts, Undersecretary?
Tourism is a beautiful industry, and the students of today will play a very vital role in shaping the course of tourism in the next several years. So my gentle advice to the students, don't get discouraged, do not despair. We will pull through, and you will see the full potential of tourism, once we get past the challenges that we're facing now.
Wow, you both had such beautiful sentiments about the future. I love that. In particular, I love the idea that students, what comes naturally to students, certainly the environment does. Almost every student out there is passionate about sustainability in the future. And the second thing they're passionate about is technology. I mean, they're such natural users of technology. And so those two things are going to be hugely in demand for tourism. And I suspect, not only will they find themselves roles in this industry, but they'll find themselves thriving in the industry at the same time. And I do love that sentiment about tourism is just such a beautiful industry, and it really, really, I've been trying to get out of tourism for 25 years. It hasn't worked yet. It's such a lovely spot. Any other questions? I've just got a couple minutes left. I don't see any more questions coming up on this. How about you? Either of you have anything else? Ghada, I think the world is fascinated by these new cities, these lost cities, this mummy parade that you've gone through. The ancient Egypt is coming back in 2021. You've had such great press on Egypt right now. Do you want us to give us a quick overview in the minute that we have left?
And this is what was one of our activities that we wanted to keep the destination up in the minds of everyone. While there is a worldwide closure, we had a street parade for the first time where 22 kings and queens of ancient Egypt 3,500 years ago were moved from one museum to the other. There is a lot of messages behind that. First, we wanted to say that we have many other museums rather than the Egyptian museum that you used to see. So when you're coming back to us, you will be seeing a different experience. You will be having a fresh and new experience. And there is a new whole view of the archaeology and the antiquities presentation. Second, we wanted to give the assurance to the public, to the Egyptians, that be proud of who you are, be proud of your ancient history. His Excellency, the President himself, went to meet the kings, because after all, those were people who ruled the country, and they deserve a royal celebration and royal welcome to their final place. So again, this how important it was, and the important element in this is the reaction of the Egyptians. Rather than the tourists and the foreign press, Egyptians felt that they would be regarding tourism and tourists in a different perspective. That we wanted to show the whole world. Everyone were sharing the videos and the parade to their friends and to their foreign friends. So there is a whole feeling on the mysterious and the eagerness of the antiquities and for the mummies, and this is what we really wanted to be. From a tourism perspective, I would have loved if tourism was in its normal times, so people can see the parade in the streets. But again, international media and digitization and communication was played the right part for us as well in getting the whole world to see the parade.
Thank you. I'm just going to quickly ask, we've got 1 minute left with Benito. Anything new and exciting that's going on in the Philippines? There must be 100 things, but tell us one thing that you love about the future.
Well, for one, we're also hosting a PATA event in May, but I think we'll let PATA HQ take care of promoting that event. I think what's important is that we now have this unique opportunity to transform tourism into a more responsible and accountable industry that is built around inclusiveness and sustainability. We have that chance. Now we have that opportunity to reframe, to recalibrate, and to reimagine a tourism industry that is caring of Mother Nature, the people, the communities that are dependent on it, and of course, for the travelers of tomorrow. And to borrow your words earlier, tourism will be stronger and better. I think you mentioned that earlier, Greg. So let me end it on that note.
Benito, that was an amazing ending. I could not have summarized it better. I love your enthusiasm and support it wholeheartedly, both of you. You both come from countries that are just on that dream list for everybody, and we can't wait to come and visit you again. So I want to thank the panelists. Thank you very much. I did get a note from CISA He was having technical issues. He could not join at all. He sends his profound apologies, and hopefully we'll pick up with him again at another PATA event. So I want to thank you both very, very much. I'm going to hand it back to Paul. And I thank you again. I really, really enjoyed meeting and chatting with you today. So thank you.
Thank you. Pleasure.
Well, thank you very much, Greg, too. You did an excellent job moderating. Thank you, Vice Minister Gata. Thank you, Undersecretary Benito. Thank you so much. And as Benito said, we will be having an event in the Philippines, a virtual event sponsored by the Philippines at the end of May. I believe it's going to be hybrid. So if you're a local Filipino, you can attend the event. If you're international, you can come join us virtually. So I'll let you guys go. I know you guys have I know, Greg, you got to go to sleep, and Vice Minister, I think somebody's been calling you, and Benito, I think you probably have to get to dinner. So I'll let you guys all go, and I'll do a quick wrap up. Thank you so much. Thank you so much
Paul.
for spending the past hour with us. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody.
So I'll do a quick wrap up here while so once again, thank you to Greg, Benito, and Gata. Unfortunately, as I said, CISA couldn't join us. Hopefully, we can get him maybe on our next event next year when we're actually in person at Ras Al Khaimah. So as we wrap up the end of the day, last time I want to thank. For the last one for today, I want to thank our platinum sponsor, the Ras Al Khaimah Tourism Development Authority, our gold sponsor, the Global Tourism Economy Forum, our official debate topic partner for tomorrow's debates, Airbnb, our session sponsor for the session that just passed, 2031, and of course, iFree Group, our sponsor, another sponsor for this event. Now, talking about tomorrow, what do we have on store tomorrow? So, tomorrow morning, we have the PATA board meeting. So if you're a PATA board member, please do join that. There's some important stuff happening there. If you haven't gotten the link to join, please feel free to email Kay or myself. It's kay@pata.org or paul@pata.org. So that board meeting is happening tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. Bangkok time. For the youth, there is an Sdg Workshop, Scaling Up Your Impact. I think this is sponsored by Sigmund, one of the speakers. So that will happen at 10 a.m. I think you have to. I think that's open, so you can just come in and jump right into that. At 2 p.m., we'll have an executive interview with BBC. Rocky Phillips, the CEO of Rock TDA, will be sitting down with Carmen Roberts. After the interview, there's a video, and there's a chance to win 3 fantastic prizes. It's a zip line at Jabal Jais, the longest zip line in the world, the Pearl Farm, and the Bear Grylls Explorers Camp, half-day excursion. So you have to come for the executive interview and stay for the video and pay attention to the video and then take the quiz. Top 3 quiz winners will have a chance to win a prize. Then after the executive interview is the PATA Leaders Debate. It's always a fun, engaging activity. The 2 topics will be economic benefits over sustainable development, which is the tension between the two, which is what should we focus on as we look towards recovery. So that is tomorrow's program. Any questions about today's program, feel free to email me. My email is very simple. It's paul@pata.org. Any questions about today's program, tomorrow's program, or any of the other activities that we're doing in the future, anything in the past, feel free. I'm here to help you. Here to help you and the industry. So that's it. That's the end of the day. Thank you once again, everybody, for joining this session. Thank you for everybody who's joined all the sessions, like Zaim. Thank you everyone who's been posting on the activity wall. Thank you again to our speakers for spending the time with us. Thank you once again to our sponsors. Thank you to our members, our life members, our chapter members. Without your continued support, none of this would be possible. And last but not least, thank you to all of you for joining us today. And hopefully I will see you tomorrow. Take care and have a wonderful rest of your day. See you.